Well, I think first of all, um, once you have a better relationship with yourself, then every other relationship benefits. It improves because you can be more authentic. You know, you can share more vulnerably, you can share authentically, honestly, how you feel. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my show. I am your host, Nimai Delgado, and I'm excited for this episode. Today, we're going to be talking about me. like, the first episode that we launched was I spoke a little bit about the relaunch and the conversation that I had with Bianca. I just wanted to give you guys an update about my life. And on this episode, I have my good friend Simon Hill from the Plant Proof podcast, and he's going to be interviewing me. We're good friends, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity for you guys to get to know me a little bit better because I haven't done many interviews over the past few years, um, and I have never done an interview on my own show. So, what a great opportunity for you guys to connect with me, for me to connect with you, and hopefully share some things, share some insights that I've learned over the past few years. And let's go ahead and get started. I'm excited for this one.
I'm excited too.
Yeah.
Cool.
You want to introduce yourself? I kind of did it for you,
Yeah,
but
you
yeah.
did a pretty good job.
Okay.
I'm Simon Hill. You'll perhaps see me on a future episode. I think I have
You will.
a sneaky suspicion that might happen. I should say I was going to say thank you for having me, but given its roles reversed,
Yeah.
you can
Thanks
thank
for
me.
having me
Yeah.
on your show, Simon.
um. Cool. Well, new show. You just sort of described, I guess, what the intent is here.
hmm
And you have evolved a lot over the last few years in particular. So I think it's going to be cool for people to see more of Nimai, and perhaps some other aspects of your character that you haven't shared before. And you have a very interesting upbringing. You know, your uh, parents raised you in a sort of atypical way, I guess, compared to many these days. Do you want to start there? We go back
Yeah.
to young Nimai Delgado.
Yeah. It all
Uh,
it all began
yeah,
in
what was life like then?
yeah. So early on in my childhood, I was raised in South Mississippi. Um, Fun place to grow up. Not much to do. Lots of places to explore. You know, looking back at my childhood, I feel really grateful for being in that environment because it allowed me so much freedom and there was safety there too. There was very little to worry about being in the country. And the unique part about my upbringing was that it was in a spiritual community, and my parents had basically shifted their belief system earlier on in their life. They were Catholic. They were raised in Argentina. They found their spirituality through food, actually,
Mm.
which is ironic. My mom, um, she became a vegetarian after witnessing a pig being slaughtered in front of her in Argentina by her young boyfriend at the time. And that moment, she like, I'm never gonna eat meat again. So she became a vegetarian. My grandfather protested and was like, no, you
Mm.
need meat, and especially
Particularly in Argentina,
yeah,
right?
that's what I was gonna say. My grandfather was like the most Argentinian dude
Yeah.
you'll ever meet. But he was like, "Pero che, you need meat," and so, but he went along with it, and he used to bring her vegetarian magazines and whatnot. And she ended up being invited to a place that served vegetarian food, and it was actually a Hare Krishna temple.
Okay.
And every Sunday they would have a feast, and they would serve free vegetarian food to anybody that wanted to come
Mm.
and consume it, and then also do lectures. So they would read teachings from the Bhagavad Gita, which is a book that is basically describes the story of a prince that's about to go into battle. And just as he's about to go into battle, he is facing extreme conflict because he's about to go to war with his kinsmen, so his family, and his charioteer that is taking him into battle happens to be God, and he reveals himself as God, and they have this very deep conversation. And so, as you can imagine, the story is great. Even regardless of what you believe,
Mm.
it's an amazing book, and there's tons of really valuable lessons in there to learn from. And my mom felt that same way, and she was just completely blown away by what she was learning in the community there.
So how old was
So,
she then?
I think she was 19.
19.
Yeah,
Living in Argentina.
yeah, in Buenos Aires.
And was there a significant vegetarian community?
I have no idea, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I mean, that Argentina is known for their beef production.
Mhm.
It's known for their steak. That's pretty pretty fundamental part of the Argentine identity.
Mm.
So it kind of went against her
That would have been
culture.
difficult to navigate.
Yeah, yeah. So she basically renounced her identity and committed herself to her spirituality.
Mm.
And around that same time, she met my dad, and they fell in love, and they both went to the temple. They ended up following their guru. They told my parents about an opportunity to come to the United States
Okay.
and live in this farm
So
community.
your dad's also Argentinian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they immigrated to the United States and ended up in this spiritual community in South Mississippi called New Taliban. And that's where I was raised. It was a beautiful farm community. We had a temple. We had ponds that I would swim in. We had cows that were like rescue cows, and they would, milk the cows and create ghee and butter and all of
Mhm.
these things. It was like very self-sustaining, a little
Mhm.
community. But it was predominantly Indians, and my family was pretty much the only Latino family in this community. It was a mix of different families and different cultures, but
Mhm.
predominantly Hindu culture
Mhm.
was kind of the main theme there. So,
So in Hindu culture,
mhm,
the cow is sacred, right?
yes,
Yes.
yes,
So you don't eat the cow,
no,
but you can eat the milk and the cheese and the butter.
yeah, yeah. So there's a concept called ahimsa,
Mhm.
which basically means translates to nonviolence.
Mhm.
So they have ahimsa milk, which you can retrieve milk from the cow
Mhm.
whenever a cow gets naturally impregnated and it's producing more
Mm.
milk, and that is kind of like the
Mm.
concept of like compassionate milk.
Mm.
Um,
Which
and
is
that
a bit different to
is very,
factory farms
very
today,
different
right?
than today's milk in
Yeah.
most places you would get milk from. And so fast forwarding a little bit, even growing up in that community was challenging because we were the only Latino
Mm.
community or family in the community. So that brought about its own kind of like challenges for a young kid. But then outside of that community was a traditional Southern community. So we're talking about Southern Catholics, Baptists, Christian faith was the
Mhm.
predominant religion down there. So we were misunderstood.
So
You
yeah,
know,
was there much integration between those communities?
No, it was pretty separate. It was
Okay.
pretty separate, but I ended up going to public school. So my mom and dad would wear traditional,
Yeah.
like my mom would wear saris outside of we would go to Walmart. My mom would be dressed head to toe in a sari.
Mm.
They would dress me and my brother and sister that way too, not in saris, but
Did you
in traditional
feel
clothing.
different?
I feel like I noticed that people were treating me different, or maybe I internalized that a little bit, but not that much. It wasn't until I went to public school
Okay.
as a young kid that I really realized I was different,
Yeah.
and that other kids weren't. They didn't have the same kind of belief system as me. They didn't live
Mhm.
the same way as I did, and that was hard. That was hard because when you're that young, you just want
Mm.
to fit in. You just want to be part of the community, be accepted by your peers.
What were some of those like early beliefs that you had? Were you kind of aware of the spirituality part of your upbringing at that stage?
Yes. I didn't really discuss it much with other kids, but the main area where it came up was food,
Mm.
ironically, because I would bring my food. Most of the kids ate public or the school lunch,
Mm.
which was like hamburgers, pizza, hot
Mm.
dogs, those types of things.
Standard stuff.
Yeah, and I didn't eat any of those, so I'd bring my lunch every day, and my mom would cook me like curries and dal and subji that's like you open up the container and it just fills the room with all these
Mhm.
aromas and
Yeah, yeah.
just like smells completely different. So immediately all the kids were like, "What are you eating?" And it's like mushy, and
Yeah, yeah,
so it
yeah.
was. I would get questions a lot about that, and then the common question about why I didn't eat meat. Why wouldn't I eat the hamburger? Or if I was stuck on an island with nothing to eat,
Mm,
would I eat meat? All of these common questions that I would get asked at a young age, and I didn't really know how to defend myself or defend my beliefs. It was just what I was taught
mm,
and what I practiced. So eventually, after enough of those conversations, I just kind of just
mm,
stopped talking about it
mm,
altogether and avoided it because I didn't want to be questioned. I didn't want to have to defend myself every single
mm.
day.
Hard when you believe in something, but the norm in society is the opposite.
Here,
Mm,
it, in the United States, normal is very different than other parts of the world.
mm,
In India, it's the way I was raised was more
mm,
normal. Um, but It was it was easy to maintain. I feel like I never really questioned it that much.
So you didn't go home and say to your mother and father, "I want to eat meat."
No, I never had that
Mm,
desire. I feel like growing up on a farm gave me access to animals, and I had like a deep
mm,
connection. I have pictures of me when I was like 3 years old, like climbing on the back of bulls,
mm,
like in the cow field and just like riding cows and just like I had a deep connection to them. So I never wanted them to
mm,
have to like get killed for me to eat them, so that connection was very strong for me. So I
mm,
never had the desire to eat it. I never denied that it probably tasted good.
mm,
I have senses. I can smell. I Everybody tells me it tastes good, but it,
mm.
it just was a strong enough connection for me to not want to.
It's interesting. I mean, we went to eating our way to extinction last night, and the narrative there is about reconnecting with the nature
Hmm.
and reconnecting to how our food choices are affecting the world around us. Uh, what's interesting is that most of us, when we're born, we naturally have a care for animals and
Hmm.
and for the planet, and then slowly, if we're living in a Western society, we can tend to lose that connection. And now the narrative is trying to get people to reconnect with that,
Hmm.
so that we can do better. Um, so, this time of your life, you're in Mississippi. Whenever I think of Mississippi, I think of Mississippi.
Hmm.
I learned that in
Hmm.
primary school. That was a fun way of learning how to spell that. Did you learn that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, so you this is your elementary school stage, and then you
Yeah.
mentioned when you changed school, so public school.
Hmm.
Is this high school now?
Yeah. I went to public school from kindergarten to
Okay,
till I graduated.
till you graduated,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then so as you're moving into more teenage years,
Hmm.
and becoming a young adult, what was life like for you then? Was there any growing challenges with the way that you were living compared to the typical people at your school?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we left the spiritual community around like 9 or 10, and my parents had to just assimilate into the material world.
Mm,
Essentially, they had to get jobs, they had to provide for themselves because we were kind of like living as part of the community
mm,
before. So they were hustlers. My parents were always working so hard to provide for me, my brother, and my sister. But just like any family that's strapped for cash and have this financial burden, it's hard.
mm,
So that was difficult growing up, and it brought about its own challenges. But I would say that my experience there was, it was hard in a way because I couldn't understand it. I was so young and my parents were trying to protect me, and I would leave the house quite a bit, and then just like got caught up with my friends, and then started disconnecting with like home life and family life because it was just too difficult to be around a lot of the
mm,
time. So I found comfort in doing things outside. So that's when I
mm.
started like skating and getting into sports and just being a lot more physically active and just being a kid.
Yeah.
So that lasted pretty much until high school. And after high school, I was like, I wanted to go to college like on the West Coast because although I liked Mississippi, I liked my friends and whatnot. I just always felt called to go to the West Coast and kind of like a little bit more open minded
Mm,
atmosphere. Mississippi is unique because um, still a lot of racism down there. Still a lot of intolerance to other cultures. At least when I was down there, I haven't
mm,
lived in Mississippi since like 2008. But I always felt like an outcast in my community
mm.
because I never felt like I belonged.
Because you had the Argentinian background and the faith based sort of spirituality practice.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like like it's just one of those things where maybe other people feel this way too, but I just never felt like I belonged there. I
Mm,
never felt like I could really be myself around my friends because of these belief systems that I was raised with.
mm,
And most kids around there, they go hunting and fishing and
mm,
barbecuing and things like that that just didn't resonate with me fully.
mm-hmm,
So I always felt like I was kind of limiting who I
mm.
was.
And was Mississippi all you kind of knew at that stage? Had you
Yeah,
done much traveling?
no, we didn't
No.
have money to travel very far.
So you
We went
wanted
to
to
like
get out,
Florida,
see
places like
see
that.
what
Yeah,
else was out in the
yeah,
world.
yeah. So I ended up going to school in Louisiana
Mm,
after high school and went to college to get my engineering degree.
okay.
And
Why
that,
engineering?
originally for my grandpa. So
Okay.
my grandpa was an airline pilot, and he used to take me flying. So we would go. We had a local airport, and he knew the pilots, so they would lend him the plane, and he would take me up and teach me all about the planes. And so I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer and
Hmm.
design airplanes or work on airplanes. And the school I got accepted to didn't have an aeronautics program, so I went to the next best thing, which was mechanical
Hmm.
engineering. And I still wanted to get a minor in aerospace engineering and turbo machinery because I really wanted to work on jets. And then once I got into those classes, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I want to design jets anymore because it was tough. Um,
The maths.
yeah, it just it. To be honest, I went into it for that was my original interest, and then I got more enamored by the money, the financial
Mm,
aspect of like, okay, like money was always such a
mm,
topic, such
mm.
a tense topic at home
Where
growing up.
was spirituality for you at this stage? Were you suppressing it?
Yeah, I didn't have much
Okay.
of a connection to spirituality at that point. Like
Yeah.
pretty much like from the ages of like 13 onwards, I didn't reject it, but I just distanced myself from it.
Mm,
So
okay.
like I was just trying to be normal. I was just trying to be
Mm,
one of
quote
the
unquote
guys.
normal.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So engineering school,
Yeah.
and then you finish that,
Hmm.
and is that when you take up the opportunity in California?
Yeah. So I accepted a job out in California with an oil company of all industries. I originally this is how much of a sellout I was. I while I was in college, I did a internship at a paper mill where they had a power plant, and I worked in the power plant, and it was sustainable energy because they would actually put energy back into the
Mm,
grid based off the processes they had there. So I found it fascinating. I thought it was going to be good for the
mm,
environment, and that's where the direction of power and energy was going. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get into that. And with that experience, it was very attractive for companies across different industries. So ironically, an oil company had given me an offer, and it was in California. It was the only one in California.
mhm,
It was the highest pay by 30, 40% than my next highest offer. And I was like, I'm out. I got student loans. This is going
mhm,
to provide financial stability. Never once questioned whether it was what I wanted to do.
mhm,
It was purely financially motivated.
mhm. So you say it was sustainable. So
Hmm.
when you got in there, what was the work like? Was it living up to the sort of expectations that you had with regards to sustainability?
Oh, no, no. I mean, I knew that the oil and gas industry wasn't sustainable. I was kind of
Yeah.
like, just like I said, just selling out
Yeah.
for the paycheck. But the position that I had was kind of like it was more of like the police of the company. So I would
Mhm.
make sure that the company was following compliance and
Mm.
regulation, and um, when things were ready to be taken out of service because they were high risk to personnel or the environment, then I was the guy that would walk into the meeting and say, "Hey guys, we need to shut down. We need to
Mm.
spend $10 million or however big the project is to
Mm.
make these repairs." And nobody was happy whenever I'd come into the room. So not only did I not really enjoy the work that I was doing, I just never felt like it was fulfilling. And
Mm.
just the moment I got to work, I remember feeling that way. I was like, is this what I'm going to do for the next 40 years and then retire and finally get to do the things that I want?
Mm.
But I felt stuck. I felt that that was the path I had to take.
What do you think about this? There's this kind of prevailing idea that people that are in the oil industry are bad people.
Mm,
But, I can imagine like you've been inside a company. I imagine that a lot of
hmm
people are just kinks in the chain, everyday people.
hmm
They have families, they're just providing, they're turning up, they're doing their 9 to 5,
hmm
and they're good people with good intent.
hmm
Would I be right in thinking that?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience in the department that I worked in and the people that I engaged with, it's easy to demonize an industry like that and think that there's some puppet master at the top,
Mm,
calling the shots that like really hates the world and just wants to profit. And there may be some truth to that people are very profit driven with their decisions, but in my case, people just wanted to do their job. They
mm,
just wanted to do their job well and get promoted and provide for their families. And
mm,
um, you know, it was an interesting inside look at a company like that. And even with that being said, I still never felt like it fully aligned with who I was.
mm.
And I remember being in meetings thinking to myself, like, wow, these people really care about what we're talking about right now. Like when we're working on projects, and
And you were checked out.
I was so checked out. I was like thinking about what I was going to train
So were
that
you like,
day.
yeah, so
Like,
gym, I want to get into the
yeah,
gym
yeah,
that had started to become a big part of your life at this stage.
yeah.
But I'm just interested, as you're turning up to work for this oil company, were you kind of aware of the narrative in the news and the media about oil and the damage it's causing and all of that, and then turning up and like battling with that kind of friction, that internal dialogue between, what your heart is saying
hmm
is in line with your values and beliefs, and then what your actions are?
Yeah, I justified it by doing my job good,
Yeah.
which was, within the regulations that was set out by the state to make sure that we did our part,
Mm,
and made sure that my voice was loud enough to protect the environment, to protect
mhm,
the people that were working
mhm,
in the industry. So that was kind of like my justification for it, but I still never felt good. I was like, I'm working for a company that's making a dollar,
mhm,
exploiting the earth and
mhm,
destroying the environment, and I didn't ever really feel good about it.
mhm,
So that was a little bit more subtle, but I knew in my heart it wasn't what I wanted to do, and it wasn't
mhm,
aligned. So, but again, I felt stuck. I had all these
mhm.
student loans I had to
It
pay
was
off.
paying the bills.
It was paying the bills. Yeah. And
Yeah, I get it.
when you come from such humble beginnings and like a scarcity mindset, you're like,
Yeah,
what am I going to do? How am I going to? I felt guilty about
yeah,
having
yeah,
these
yeah.
things. I was like, I have such a stable, great paying job. Like, how could I leave this? Like, this
Mm,
is like a slap in the face to my parents who like immigrated to give me a better opportunity. And
mm,
here I am throwing it all away,
mm,
So there was a bit of internal
mm.
dialogue there as well and struggle.
Yeah, but it speaks to the importance, coming back to the people that are caught in these systems. The
hmm
majority of them are good people, and there'll be people that have dedicated their entire life to going and studying engineering, working in
hmm
the industry for 20 years. And although the oil industry can be painted, in bad light, it's important that as there's a transition, that all of these people who are good people are looked after, and
hmm
are able to transition their jobs as well, and
hmm
continue to provide, the necessary um, support for their families.
hmm
Um, so gym starts becoming taking over your life,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
thinking about, am I going to train chest or back
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
all the important stuff,
All the
right?
important stuff, right?
uh, how did that start?
That was just my coping for being in a new place, a new state, not knowing anybody. Um, my last year of college, I made friends with some personal trainers and
Mhm,
really went to the gym more frequently and just started learning from them. And I really
mhm,
enjoyed it and made friends that way. So I figured when I moved to California, I'll just make friends in the gym and just meet people that way and
mhm,
socialize there. And got really into it. The more I trained, the more I liked it. The more I could find myself like working through things, and it's like you're in like this workshop where you're just pushing yourself every day and seeing where you can um take yourself, not only just like lifting weights is great, but it's really the mental fortitude and resilience that you build up in those moments.
Mm,
Like, how long can you sit with that discomfort? How comfortable can you become with it? And then when you don't think you
mm,
can do something and you do it, it's like that little reward that you get every
mm,
time. So for me, that was really why I was doing it. Although I loved feeling great, it was like the mental aspect of
mm.
training that I really admired and was looking for.
And at this stage, you were vegetarian. So
Yeah,
at
yeah.
university, were when you were speaking with personal trainers and you were in the gym training, were those around you aware that you were
Oh yeah.
vegetarian? And what was the, at that time, what was the kind of uh, the 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 various um, opinions that people had on the way that you were fueling yourself, and whether you would be able to get desired results?
I guess it wasn't that much of a conversation. By that time I was really good at not talking about it,
Yeah.
or not bringing up that I was vegetarian. My friends knew, but we never really talked about it. Um, but I had, there was enough comments for
Mm,
me to know that people didn't think it was
mm,
suitable or possible to
mm,
to build muscle at that time, and especially in the South. I mean, so
mm.
much revolves around food. So much culture revolves
How
around food down there.
how did you feel personally? Because I mean, at that stage, you hadn't really, uh, you hadn't seen the results personally at the
hmm
very beginning. Did you have any doubts, or was it not something that you were really focused on?
No, I didn't have any doubts. It was kind of like I just kind of accepted that people just didn't know.
Mm,
People just didn't know that you could do it, and it wasn't my job to let
mm,
them know that it was possible.
mm,
It wasn't until I started really building muscle in California
mhm,
that people started to ask me more questions.
mm,
And then when I did my first show, um, that was whenever I went vegan. I went fully
mm,
vegan, which meant that I gave up dairy,
mhm,
um, and that was pretty much the only thing I was eating at the time was just dairy products,
mhm.
whey protein,
Not
cheese.
eggs.
No, no eggs
Okay.
at that time either. So that was when things started getting interesting because I was building muscle, my physique was improving, and I did the show as a vegan and won the entire
Mm,
show. So immediately afterwards, people in my gym started asking me questions. People online started asking me questions, and I was like somewhat proud. I was like,
mm,
people need to know that you can do this. That there is this alternative approach that can yield the same results, and you can actually have success
mm,
with it. And I didn't find it hard. I found it challenging initially to kind of like um, find what sources of protein I needed. And that was my first time ever counting macros
mm,
or tracking food or anything. But I mean, I'm a data guy, I'm a numbers guy. So that
mhm,
once I figured it out, it was pretty simple for me to follow.
mm. So why the decision to drop the dairy before the bodybuilding contest? That seems like a bit of a risky move.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a video that I saw that I believe it was Facebook, something, YouTube, one of these videos that I just stumbled across or somebody sent to me about dairy farms. And it was extremely disturbing for me because as a vegetarian, I always made this justification that they wouldn't kill the cow and the
Mm,
cows weren't being killed for the milk. And that was just one narrow aspect of me looking at dairy farms. And I never took a look under the hood to see what was going on in those
mm,
factories because they don't, I mean, it's almost impossible to get footage of what goes on in
mm,
those places. Um, and this video just exposed to me the conditions that those animals were in, how they were treated, how they were exploited and commodified in a way that was just disturbing. And I just thought to myself, I worked in a chemical plant at the time.
mm,
So at the oil patch where I worked at, we had a really big chemical plant, one of the biggest in California. And I just saw a lot of similarities. And I was like, wow, here's a commodity that's being, you know, extracted from, this source. And all they're looking for is efficiency. They're looking to
mm,
get the most out of this to this product at the expense of, you
mm,
know, this animal or this environment. And that just didn't sit right with me because like I was an engineer and I knew that there's ways to make processes more efficient, and
mm,
this particular process is at the expense of these living creatures.
mm,
And seeing their eyes and seeing that I just felt so bad, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of this
Mm,
anymore. I don't want to contribute to it. I don't want to pay these, you know, I don't want to pay somebody to work harder to squeeze more juice out of these animals.
mm,
And then the more I looked into it, then I realized that these cows have to be pregnant in order to lactate and produce milk. So they artificially inseminate the cows,
mm,
which is a whole process. And then once the cows get pregnant, they remove the babies from the cows, and the babies go off into
mm,
another process where they're sold and eaten, and then the mother cows get exploited and then sold as meat at the end of their life cycle when they're no longer suitable to produce milk. So at the end of the day, the cows still die, and I was
mm.
like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, it's heavy. I think
Hmm.
out of all of the animals we eat, and they all live a pretty horrific life, the dairy cows perhaps the worst
Hmm.
because they are abused through their entire life and then ultimately end up being eaten.
Hmm.
But something that is often hard to reconcile is, can you be healthy without dairy? So was that something that challenged you? Did you have to do any research or look into particular things to work out if you're going to remove dairy? You know, A, how are you just going to be healthy, and B, how are you going to continue to build muscle?
Yeah, it wasn't it. I don't think I ever really had too much concern about the building muscle part. It was more just like, okay, well, a lot of what I eat is based around like my available choices that I was used to growing up were always like the vegetarian options, which had cheese in them, like
Mm-hmm.
cheese pizza, cheese quesadillas, grilled cheese, bean and cheese burritos from Taco Bell. So I was
Taco
like,
Bell.
yeah, I was like, man, I'm gonna have to cut out a lot of the food that I normally
Yeah.
eat or find replacements for it or just figure it out. So that was more of my concern rather than building muscle. Building
Mm-hmm.
muscle was like the afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because I had done enough kind of research into at that time I was like into meal prepping and
Mm-hmm.
into like macro counting and everything. I was like, there's clearly enough. There's got to be enough beans for me to eat or legumes or plant based protein powders to take in order to meet my
Mm-hmm.
requirements. I'll just figure it out. And it turned out to be much easier than what I thought it was going to be
Mm-hmm.
because with the research that I was doing, yeah, I recognized that I didn't need as much protein as what was being
Mm-hmm.
advertised to me. So the typical 1 to 2 grams of protein, um, kind of standard that most bodybuilders follow, I was seeing success like in my own experience with far less.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I probably weighed 150 pounds, and I was getting like 120 grams of protein,
Mm-hmm.
which is like under that 1 gram per protein
Mm-hmm.
mark. And I just followed that all the way up until my show, and I won. So I was like, okay, there's something to this. There's something that more people need to know about this because people are like over consuming on these animals that is again it's unnecessary and not I mean I guess I didn't really feel like I was going to go convince the world. I just wanted to talk to people that were interested about it, that
Mm-hmm.
wanted to know. So I just started sharing more online.
And you, I mean, you really changed what was possible, in a big way. There was a few other probably athletes that were vegetarian or vegan at the
Mhm.
time, but
Mhm.
I'm not so sure in the professional bodybuilding world. You're probably the first, right?
I think there was a couple vegetarian bodybuilders
Okay.
before me. But at the time, I don't know. There might have been a few on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't turn professional until about a year later
Mm-hmm.
after I competed. But um, yeah, there wasn't many that were having success in kind of in the spotlight. So with the shows that I was doing, and I won a few
Mm-hmm.
more in the amateur league before turning pro, then people really started to take notice and kind of like pointing to me
Mm-hmm.
and be like, "Oh, is that vegan guy?"
Yeah. So you
Like,
became
yeah,
the
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 vegan guy
vegan pinup boy for
for
bodybuilding.
bodybuilding. Yeah,
Uh, what was that like?
it was interesting. It was interesting. It was interesting being in the bodybuilding space when you're like the only. Again, I found
Mm-hmm.
myself being the only one in a community that kind of like just didn't see the world the same way I
Mm-hmm.
did, or didn't understand how I was, you know, not eating meat.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of curiosity. A lot of people ask me if there was a lot of animosity. I never felt that. There was definitely a lot of curiosity by the other bodybuilders, because, I would. I was winning.
Mm-hmm.
And just like any sport, people want to know the competitive, like the next competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it interesting because I would share that, I wasn't consuming meat or animal products because most bodybuilders consume, well, they do egg whites in the morning. They do whole eggs, egg whites, whey protein, chicken, lean meat, bison, turkey,
Mm-hmm.
fish. That's like 7 animals just a day. People, that's common for bodybuilders. So for me to have similar results and win without doing any of having any sources of animal protein was fascinating to some of the other guys. But ironically, they still wouldn't um, look at it as a competitive advantage.
Mm. Interesting. I wonder if that's starting to change at all now.
I think there's a lot more curiosity now
Yeah.
than there was with the help of like the Game Changers and films like that, and just a lot more research and people adopting it. Because at that time there was no real people you could point to and say like, oh, this person's doing it and they're having success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wanted to continue doing it because people kept telling me what I couldn't do, and it's not that I wanted to prove them wrong. I just thought that I could. I just had a really strong belief in myself and thought, why not go for it?
Mm-hmm.
And then after I turned pro, that was when I was like, okay, now I really do have a shot. Like, okay, what do I do now? Like, I guess I'll just try to keep going. And that's when things really started to um, get muddled, I would say, like, because I felt not only like this pressure to be this vegan bodybuilding guy that people were pointing to and referencing all the time. And I was being dragged into all these, I still get dragged into like arguments on social media all the time. Half of my news feed or half of my like notifications of people tagging me arguing with somebody about whether you need meat or not, which is fine. I don't mind it, but there was an added layer of pressure to show up like extra impressive because I was vegan. So not only did I have to be like a bodybuilder, I had to be like extra impressive to be the vegan bodybuilder.
How do you not let people down?
Yeah. Yeah. Because if I lost, then it was because I was vegan.
Yeah.
But if I won, it was in spite of the fact that I was vegan.
So you had set these very high expectations.
Yeah.
I think that when anyone gets really well known for one specific thing and kind of put into a little bit of a box, there's obviously a lot of pros that come with it, and you've had a ton of opportunities. You mentioned Game Changers, but there are also challenges. What are some of the other challenges or things that you've had to kind of work through as a result of being known for kind of one thing when you feel that you're a lot more than just that?
Probably judgment. That's the biggest, which seems to be like a common theme for me in my life. Like, like having to accept being misunderstood by people and my community or by other strangers, more or less. And then with social media, that like only like magnified, like it only grew larger with the more exposure that I got. People see one picture and they make 1,000 assumptions about who you are. And that was hard because, I don't like, it's not that like, I took them to heart, but you get enough of them, you open up your phone, it's like ding, 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 ding. Like eventually you get worn out by it and you start questioning yourself and you start wondering why, or like, what am I like? Do I even want this? Do I even want this exposure anymore? Like I'm tired of like defending myself or people making accusations or judging me. So that was a big thing for me to work through. That was tough.
And is that part of the reason why you stepped away from professionally competing? Or what was the reason for giving up the actual bodybuilding from a professional point of view and focusing on other aspects of your life?
I think it was a combination of a few things. At that time, I was also finally getting enough courage to step away from my engineering career, which that took its own that had its own challenges because I was like, okay, what am I going to do for a living if I'm like so unhappy in this career that I've spent 10 years working towards? Like, how do I just step away from this and start all over? That's a scary thought.
Were your parents, were they kind of across how you were feeling at that stage? Did they offer any guidance on that?
They always supported me with whatever I decided. Like they've always been
Mm.
supportive. So they want me to be happy,
Mhm.
whether that's engineering or anything I do.
Mm.
So I had their support,
So
but
did you have to like build up the courage to walk in and resign on a
yeah,
particular day, or what did that look like?
yeah,
You did
yeah,
that?
yeah. Unexpectedly, I've shared this story before, but um, it's one of the most like influential moments of my life because it allowed me to see um, just the difference that you could make in somebody's life by sharing your truth or sticking up for what you believe in and standing for something. So I was giving a speech in London. I got invited to a Vedge Fest, and afterwards I was meeting and greeting people. There was like a line of people to meet me, and this man walks up to me, and he was already in tears,
Mm.
just coming up to me, and he embraced me, and he just was so thankful and grateful. And he's like, "I just want to thank you, man." And I was like, "For what, dude? Like, what did I do?" And he was like, "You helped save my mom's life, man. Like
Oh.
you the information that you shared, you gave me the confidence to go plant based, and I helped my mom who was suffering from diabetes at the
Mm.
time to make changes in her life because she was in the bed, she was bedridden, and she couldn't walk.
Mm.
So she eventually, after eating, she like healed herself and was able to walk and like have a much better quality of life. And I just want to thank you for that. And that forever stuck with me. I was like, man, because he referenced a specific post that I
Mm.
made, and I remember that post because I almost didn't post it. I remember thinking to myself in that moment, I was like, oh, this is a silly post. I'm not gonna do it. This is stupid. And I did, and I posted it anyway. I was like, ah, whatever, I'll just post it. And that one thought, I just had so much reflection on. I was like, man, if I wouldn't have posted that, then this man's
Mm.
mother might not have healed herself. And I just thought to myself, like, that's just one story. That's
Mm.
just one person. And who knows how many other people there are out there that could be um, finding this information useful and actually getting like healing themselves or having better quality of life and reclaiming their health
Mm.
just by empowering themselves with
It's
this
incredible.
information. So I on the plane home, I had a conversation with Bianca, and I was like, I think I'm going to quit my job. And she was like, really? Like, yeah, do it. Like, she was all for it. She was already independent at that time. And that Monday morning, I woke up and I was like, nah, I can't do it. I was nervous. I was so anxious.
Mm.
I was like, I got loans. How am I going to pay the bills? There's no way
Mm.
I'm not going to do it. And she was like, okay, like whenever the time's right. And then I got to work and I went into the meeting and we started talking about the same mundane projects that I'd been working on and that I hated. And I was like, fuck this, dude. I'm out. Like I'm out. Like
On the spot.
I'm on the spot. I got up from my seat and I walked straight to my boss's office and it was almost like I had word vomit. I was like, I'm putting in my 2 weeks. And then I was like, oh shit. Did I just say that?
And
And
there was
he
no
was like,
plan at this stage.
there was no plan. There
Okay.
was no plan.
Yeah. Just felt right.
And then after I said it, I felt this just extreme relief. I was just like, I said it. Like
Mm.
now I like
So you just
now find a
trusted
way.
that
Yeah.
everything would work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I left my career as an engineer and then
Mm.
started a coaching business. Um, and that was successful because many people were seeking the advice that I was already giving online, but they
Mhm.
wanted more personalized advice. So
Mhm.
that was good, and that brought me so much more fulfillment. Like sharing about bodybuilding and stuff was fun, but seeing people make
Mhm.
transformations and witnessing what they were experiencing and just being able to provide that
Mhm.
service for people made me so happy.
Mhm.
So I was like, why am I spending so much time like trying to compete and spending so much energy trying to show what's possible when I've already done enough?
Mhm.
Like I've proved it to myself. It's possible. I don't need to convince anybody, and I could spend more time focusing on people that need help.
Mhm.
And that's kind of why I left the bodybuilding world because I felt like there was other platforms, there was other stages that I wanted to get on
Mhm.
and share this message and reach a wider audience rather than trying to change bodybuilding culture from the inside out, which is very hard to do.
Mhm. And so today you're still doing
Coaching.
coaching, you
Hmm.
have your own platform and
Hmm.
community, but you're also doing a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh, your mind has wandered onto a number of different challenges.
Mm.
Um, talk talk through that. What what interests you outside of the bodybuilding sort of space and training people space?
You know, fitness is such a natural kind of stepping stone for personal development. You know, you can start working out for whatever reason, whether you, even if you just want to look good, you want a six pack. There's nothing wrong with that being a goal. But if you stick to it, you start to learn all of these transferable skills with discipline and effort
Mm-hmm.
and sitting with discomfort and kind of continuing to show up and falling in love with the process of working on yourself. And throughout my bodybuilding career, I also started exploring spirituality. I started exploring um, just personal development books. I mean, like all, I'm an avid reader. I love learning about growth in all areas of life, physical, spiritual, emotional. And since stepping away from bodybuilding and allowing myself to focus on business, that was a really fun venture as well because it was a whole new space and I'm a problem solver and I loved business. And then after business was good in a healthy place, um, then I started going really deeper into like just my own work that I had
Mm-hmm.
to do on myself because I was like I finally had space to breathe and to be like, man, there's some things here that I need to work through, like about myself and how do I do that? And where
Mm-hmm.
do you even start? But I felt a calling to it.
Were they things that you were aware of earlier and you were almost avoiding through just focusing on bodybuilding?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like definitely like um you talk about childhood trauma and things like
Yeah.
that. Like I had a lot of childhood trauma that I just
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalized and just didn't want to look at that. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to throw it behind me and hope it doesn't come up again. And kind of had this hyper positive, like
Mm-hmm.
toxic positive outlook on life and refused to let myself deal and heal and process emotions. So it wasn't until like last year that I realized looking back at my time in bodybuilding that I was like, oh, I was like running from something this entire time. It was like, yeah, it was providing me a space um, to heal in some ways, but
Mm-hmm.
it was also a big distraction from things that I didn't want to face about myself. And it was easier to just physically exert and move energy than it was to sit still and
Mm-hmm.
reflect.
Was that something that you were able to identify yourself, through educating yourself and reading
Mhm.
books and having conversations, or did you like seek help from a professional to help you work through that?
So I think that relationships are one of the best containers for personal growth. The people that you are in relationship, whether that is friendship, whether that is family, whether that is romantic relationships, they are pure possibilities for growth because they're
Mm-hmm.
mirrors
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. And they allow you to see parts of yourself that you couldn't see in a vacuum. So, my relationship with Bianca was definitely the biggest catalyst for my personal growth because I finally had a reason to, um, because I loved her so much that I was like, why is it so hard for me to like express myself? Like
Mm-hmm.
why can't I like why do I get frustrated whenever I try to express myself? Why do I shut down and withdraw whenever I start to feel anything uncomfortable? And that was when I finally took notice. I was like, oh, it's not her. It's not like the things that we're talking about. It's like a deeper problem here.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't recognize that until we actually did seek help through some counselors. And the first thing that they identified was like, oh, you have all this stuff that you didn't
Mm-hmm.
work through from childhood. Let's take a look at that and see how that's coming up in other areas of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was that process like? Was that challenging, confronting
Yeah.
to go back through and to like step through all of those? I'm assuming you kind of have to relive it a bit and
Hmm.
bring it back to, instead of suppressing it, you have
Yeah.
to bring it to the front and to actually work through it and process it.
One of my favorite quotes is in order to let something go, you first have to hold it.
Mm.
So I was refusing to look at the things that had hurt me in the past, and I was refusing to feel any of it.
Mm.
And I got so good at being in my logical, um, my analytical brain that I really shut off my emotional body and allowed myself to feel things. So that was a process of like, having to feel all of the things that I was running from and having shame about,
Mhm.
so much that once I popped the top, I was afraid. I was like, if I pop the top on this, I'm gonna
Mm.
have like it's just gonna like I'm gonna break down. And I had many breakdowns. Like
Mm.
I had panic attacks. I never experienced panic attacks. I never realized that I had anxiety. Um, I thought I never realized that had symptoms of depression. Um, it just didn't exist in my brain. I was like,
Mhm.
no, that's not me. Like I was in denial about a lot of things.
Do you think it would have been challenging if you to have tried to work through all of that without the help that you were getting?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because I never felt like I was so self reliant that and independent that I was like, I can do this on my
Mm.
own. I can handle this. I'll figure it out. I'll read more books. I'll learn about it. But intellectually, I was learning things, but I
Mhm.
wasn't embodying them because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to tap into it. So it wasn't until I started talking about things and feeling safe to talk about things with my partner, with these counselors,
Mhm.
that I was able to finally move through and process it and not feel ashamed about feeling emotions or being
Mhm.
emotional and having like the full spectrum of emotions and um, not just living in this toxic positive
Mhm.
place all the time.
When you go back through and you work through, you mentioned trauma, and we
Mhm.
don't need to go into the specifics. I'm sure plenty of that you might walk through in future episodes. But
Mhm.
is it is it about just is it coming to terms with what happens? Is it accepting it? Is it what specifically did you have to do in order to feel better about yourself?
Mm. I think the the biggest thing that I had to do was just sit with it. Just give my s- give myself time to and permission to sit with it and to
Mhm.
feel the things that I didn't want to feel.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that I was stacking on shame for having feelings about something, for being angry, about my childhood and things I couldn't control or didn't have, felt like I didn't have a choice in, you know?
Mm.
And I had to sit with it. I meditated, I journaled, I cried, I did breath work, I did all of these things that really helped me process it. And, what I realized is that you can't change the past,
Mm.
like it's done with. Um, but you can change how you feel about the past. You can change your
Mm.
perspective on it. And a lot of that uh, requires inspection and
Mm.
awareness around and shining a light on those parts of yourself and those
Mm.
things that you don't want to look at.
Examination.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how has going through that process, and I'm assuming that's an ongoing
Yeah.
process,
It's layers,
uh,
man. It's
but
layered.
so far, how has that then kind of translated into your everyday life and affected how you feel about yourself, and then
Hmm.
also affected how you're affecting, or how is it affecting your relationship with those around you, Bianca, for example?
Well, I think first of all, um, once you have a better relationship with yourself, then every other relationship benefits.
Mm.
It improves because you can be more authentic. You can share more vulnerably. You can share authentically, honestly, how you feel, and that just allows for a deeper connection and better understanding between two people. Because when you don't show up authentically in any relationship, or you can't express yourself, then you're presenting a version of yourself that's misaligned. It's not aligned to your true version of yourself.
Mm.
And the bigger that gap is, the less people really experience who you are.
Mhm.
So the more I've been able to bridge that gap and align those two, um, the deeper my connections have been with all of my friends, all of my family, my romantic relationship with Bianca, and the way I express myself in general now. Like I care less about what other people think. That judgment that I was so afraid of, that I adopted this story that like I had to fit in, or it wasn't safe for me to be authentic and who I am, or embrace my heritage or my upbringing, um, because I was afraid of like being unaccepted.
Mm-hmm.
That the more I accept myself, the less I cared about that.
Mm.
So yeah, it's not easy, but it's 100% worth it. My quality of life has been so much better. It's just been lighter.
Mm.
I think that's the best way I can describe it. Just lighter.
I can feel the difference, over the last few years, and in terms of how you hold yourself and the aura, how you present. This show, this is what 2.0 for the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
the Nimai Delgado podcast. Is that what
Yeah.
it's been called now?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So with all of this evolution, what's the purpose? What are you wanting to now do with, everything that you're doing from your business side and the podcast side, and what value are you wanting to offer to the people that are a part of this community?
Well, definitely with the show, I would love to talk about self expression, healing, finding balance between emotional, spiritual, and physical health, because they're all dependent on one another. And when you have those in harmony, um, then everything else in your life seems to fall into place. So I wanted to have this space to talk more openly and deeply about conversations, and not like still talk about fitness and health and the things that I always cared about and are still a very big part of who I am and my core
Mm.
values and my drivers. But also I've realized that part of my journey is the more that I share about who I am and what I believe to be my truth, the more that other people find permission in doing that for
Mhm.
themselves. So I don't know where this show is gonna go. I don't know who's gonna be on it, but I feel like if I keep having these conversations and just share openly,
Mhm.
then other people can benefit from it. And not just in the way that I mentioned earlier about, somebody's mom, reclaiming her health and in that way, but just empower people to do that for themselves and be more expressive, be more authentic, not be afraid of being accepted for who they are, because you are good enough just the way you are. You don't have to put on this front just to be liked, because you'll be liked for somebody that you're not,
Mm.
and that's not going to make you happy. It's not going to bring joy and fulfillment to your life. And the more you are okay with letting people, um, to being okay with being misunderstood is a very powerful thing, because it will attract people that do see you for you, and
Mhm.
the quality of those relationships are, um, yeah, they're priceless.
It's really powerful work. Thank you,
Mm.
Nimai Delgado, for joining me on the Nimai Delgado podcast, and sharing so openly.
Mhm.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how this show grows. And yeah,
Thank you, Simon.
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you hosting and interviewing and, being on the show, as well. We got our episode coming soon too, so be sure to tune in for that. And thank you for listening, for tuning in to this podcast. This is, the beginning of a new project of mine that I'm really passionate about, and I look forward to having guests like Simon and um, other people that are just doing inspiring work in this world. And I want to give them a space and a platform to talk about these things, because, it's the best work that we can do. Is work on ourselves, be the healthiest, most authentic,
Mm.
most expressed version of ourselves, and we're in this together. So,
Amen.
amen. See you guys.